If I wasn't reading, I require it for life.
I was just going to say I need to take a drink of water, so I'm glad you did that.
I'll just sit really close.
We're good? Ready to go? Hey there, we're the Reading Queens, and we're here to blab about our favorite books, why we love them, and the book boyfriends we wish were real. Welcome, I'm Valia. Hi.
I'm Hanna.
I'm Joanna.
I'm Alison.
And we're here to talk about all the books and bookish things, and I'm excited we're back together for another episode. So yeah, let's just kind of do our little catch up. How's everybody? How's life? What's happening?
Feels like not much has happened since last week.
That's true.
Like a week in my life consists of a lot of dirty nappies or dirty diapers and not much sleep. And apart,
It's all a blur.
Yeah, it's all a blur. And I don't like. Do you ladies do this and have like more than one book on the go at the moment? Because I seriously have a problem with how many books I am trying to read at the moment. So
Oh, yes.
I have two. Two fiction books I'm reading in paperback. I have a series on ebook which I'm trying to read, and a book on audio, and then I've got like non-fiction books in paperback, ebook, and audio. So I've probably got about 8 books on the go at the moment, and I just can't finish all of them.
No, well, 8 seems like a lot.
say
I
that's a
usually
little
do
bit
like,
much.
yeah, maybe one of each, like Kindle, paperback, hardback, and audio. Like I can do that because they're different mediums, but like having multiple on one medium, I feel like I would not be able to do
I
that.
think I need to focus on finishing some, but I find that sometimes I want to read fiction and sometimes I'm in like a non-fiction mood, so I often have those on the go. And I have been reading Nevernight for ages, but I really wanted to read Spin the Dawn for this episode to talk about it, so I started that, so even though I haven't finished it yet, so that's why I've got 2 fiction paperbacks on the go, but I think I will finish that soon and then hopefully finish both of them this week maybe.
That works. Yeah.
That's my goal.
I mean, we know I've been reading really bad this year, however you say that correctly. That's been happening in my life. I can't finish any books. I mean, I think I finish like 1 or 2 books every single month, and it's usually the podcast books. Nothing outside that I try to read seems to stick, which is really weird. And I've tried like every genre. I think it's just where like between, like personal life and work and everything like that, it's just that's where my mindset is, and it's just doesn't want to escape into a book. It just can't focus, which sucks because that would be like the perfect opportunity to escape into another world. Right?
I have definitely had that problem over the last year. I think with all the pandemic and everything going on, and everything that comes after that, I've kind of either been in like a real binge mood or like not reading at all.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Same. I read a ton of books at the beginning of the year. The first couple of months, I read like 10 books, and then I just stopped like a month ago. Just can't get through the ones I'm liking. The ones I'm reading, I just I don't know.
I'm pretty steady. I'm always reading probably 3 books at once because it's always like 2 fiction and 1 nonfiction usually, because I'll read a fiction and then realize I can't read it at bedtime, and I have to read at bedtime because if I don't read at bedtime, I don't sleep. My brain requires fiction to like get me out of my spinning thoughts so that I can sleep at night, and because I read every night, I always make it through books. So I was like,
sense,
otherwise I would be a train wreck. If I wasn't reading, I require it for life.
It's a good habit. I need to get back in that habit of reading right before I go to sleep.
Yeah, that is. I mean, I guess we're not alone, though. That makes me feel better about my weird reading right now. So yay.
My excitement was that our power went out yesterday. There was a big windstorm, and a tree hit a transformer, and I saw on Facebook someone posted a picture of like sparks flying everywhere. That's not very exciting, but I thought it was funny that I couldn't find, like, I don't know where any of my flashlights are or like any candles, but I do have multiple strands of fairy lights I use for Bookstagram. So I was like, I got like 3 or 4 strands of battery powered twinkle lights in our bedroom.
Powered.
I know, because most of those like little ones are. I do have some that are plug-in, but we were able to happily spend the evening reading. My husband's like, "What are we gonna do?" I was like, "Read, obviously." So it it was peaceful, except for the fact whenever the power goes out and you go to bed, you have to turn everything off. And I thought I had turned everything off, but I actually had missed the plug-in twinkle lights that are over my bed, and I woke up at 11 to like bright lights in my face, and then I was like trying to turn off the battery-powered ones, but it wasn't the battery-powered. It was all a mess. And I learned that I have to have white noise, or else my cat wakes me up with purring. And I was like, oh, that happens a lot more without my white noise.
Purring.
He just like creeps up. He's like, go away.
Does he
So
snore
he got
as
kicked
well?
off the bed.
Does he snore?
I don't think so. I'm trying to think. I think mostly it's just like purring, and he's got kind of a weird purr.
Because I have
Anyway, it's
definitely
quite
had
loud.
it where I've been trying to get to sleep and I have the baby snoring on one side and I have the cat snoring at the end of the bed and I'm just waiting for my husband to join in.
Well, I could hear my 4-year-old snoring in the other room, so I was like, wow, didn't know she snored. I love my white noise.
That's funny. I've been falling asleep with the TV on, and last night I didn't, and I got woken up like 30 minutes later because mosquitoes have come to town.
Oh.
And so apparently I am very attuned to their little buzzing. Like, I did not think so, because in Russia we always had mosquitoes. Like, the whole St. Petersburg is built on a swamp, so like you're gonna have mosquitoes like all the time, right? Except for obviously when they're like frozen. But when they are around, there's like a lot of them. And I remember from like my childhood, we would have times where we take like the vacuum and just like suck up the mosquitoes
Yes,
sitting
I've
on
done
the
that.
ceiling, because to get rid of them and stuff. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to like do one of those hunts around the house to try to, catch a lot of them today. But I would not wake up when I was little to their noise because they were just so normal. But I feel like this like summer, like the spring and summer, we've had a lot of mosquitoes in the house. And it's probably because I have more plants and stuff. So that like makes sense. But now I'm like really attuned to the noise and it's very annoying because I'm like, wait, I don't understand. It's so tiny, like the little buzzing. But anyway, yeah. So I woke up in the middle of the night like 3 times and then finally give in and turned on, like, I think it was Olympus Has Fallen in the background so that I can sleep because it was like
So
explosions instead of
peaceful.
the buzzing. I know, but I can sleep with that, but I can't sleep with the
Have
buzzing.
you
It's so
tried
weird.
white noise?
I can't really sleep with white
You need
noise.
some explosions.
I do. I used to fall asleep to Criminal Minds. I've like taken a break to falling asleep to that, but that's usually the show that I have on in the background. I've tried Supernatural, and it usually works, except for when they cut to like commercial. They make
Makes it
that really
loud.
loud bang noise. Yeah, that doesn't work for me.
I used to
But-
take naps. I used to work kind of crazy hours, so I'd come home in the afternoon and take a nap. This is before kids, and I always put on the History Channel because the commercials didn't do that, and so I was able to sleep to
Oh.
the History Channel, and
That makes sense.
I
Yeah.
couldn't sleep
Do
to
you guys
explosions.
get weird dreams from
Oh yeah,
sleep to TV?
oh yeah, I used to,
Yeah.
and
I don't. I get weird dreams when I don't write. I think I've mentioned that here before. But like, yeah, Criminal Minds is probably the best one for me because their voices are just so soothing. Even they're like talking about serial killers, but they talk in like that really nice tone of voice, and it's like really they all have really good, nice voices. So I'm just like, oh yes, tell me about how he did something with that murdered victim. Like, I don't know. It's very weird. It's very strange. And I don't write mysteries like this type of mysteries or anything. I mean, I write cozy mysteries, but yeah, I don't write anything that would like inspire it. It's just odd, but it's me.
love it. I love it.
Anyway, moving on. Let's talk about some books. But yeah, if you guys know this by now, or if you're new, we do trope discussions every other episode. And what happens is the previous week, we'll pick a book that follows the same theme, and then we announce the theme in the next episode and talk about the books and how it, the trope plays into it. So we're going to start off with Hanna talking about her book. And can you tell us the trope as well before you start?
The trope is... Now I'm trying to remember exactly what we called it. Competitions The competition.
contest.
Contest. I'm like, it wasn't games, but kind of.
Right.
So I read Spin the Dawn by Elizabeth Lim. People call it Project Runway meets Mulan, and I think calling it Mulan is like a really big stretch.
Okay.
I don't know. It's Asian and she dresses up like a boy. I'm like, that's it, really. That's Mulan-ish about it.
Oh.
So I'm like, whatever. But it's about a girl named Maya, and her dad used to be a famous tailor and really amazing, but lately she's been doing all the work in the shop. I believe it's because they lost her mother, and then they're all really upset about it. And the dad doesn't take it well. So then there's at the court, they're looking to get a new royal tailor. So instead of just picking someone, they get 12 tailors from around the land to come together, and they compete in a variety of contests to prove who the best tailor is that the emperor should choose. I believe it's the emperor. But girls can't be tailors. So she dresses up as a boy and goes to court, and they have all these contests, and some of the other participants, most of them are like older men who are very well established and have been like sewing for nobles for decades, and some of them are really nice to her, a couple of them, and some of them make her life very difficult, and you know, there's backstabbing and ruining of projects. And the first part I thought was pretty interesting. I love to sew. I sew myself. So I find clothing construction interesting. And there's all this talk about, like, they have the challenge. It is kind of Project Runway, or ish, you know, if you ever watched that, where they have, like, go make a dress in 2 days out of trash, or, you know, whatever. Because I do think one of them's made out of paper, and, like, there is these different things they have to do. And then there's always the court magician is coming through Eden with the, you know, the people, and so he's love interest. I don't know how to make that a smooth transition. But he's very kind of, at the beginning, he's very aloof and very, like, I don't know, held back. And I do enjoy books with the sort of romance where at the beginning, like, I don't know, the guy's very closed off. Like, he's not mean, but just, like, impersonal. And then when you see how vulnerable they can get by the end, and, like, when you get to, like, actually see their depth of emotion, I love that. I guess it's a very, like, Pride and Prejudice thing for me to like. So there's all of that is, like, the first half. And then she gets set this impossible task and has to go on a quest. And she has to sew a dress out of the sun, a dress out of the moon, and a dress out of the stars. And it kind of turns, like, almost a mythological bent. She has to, like, each time they have to go on this quest, her and Eden, to, like, figure out how to get, like, there's this way to get fabric out of the stars, and they have to go and collect it and then sew this dress. And there's just, like, a lot of, like, sacrifice and a lot of, I don't know. It's beautifully written. I loved it. I keep meaning to read book 2. Book 2 wasn't as well received as book 1, so I feel like I've been holding off on it, even though I love it. But I'm sure I'll read it soon because I think it'd be great. It's a duology, and I find sometimes in duologies they go romance heavy in the first book, and then it's kind of like fixing a bunch of stuff in the second book to get to the happy ending in the end, but that there's, like, a lot less of the two characters interacting. So it might be that that's what's going on with this one. I'm not sure. But I did love it. I think Elizabeth Lim wrote a beautiful book, and I love the creativity of it. And the cover, I forget what her name is, the artist who did the cover, but I follow her on Instagram, and look it up. It is one of the most gorgeous pieces of art I've ever seen. Like, I adore the cover in it. It's on my list to buy in hardback just so I can pet it and look at it all the time.
I do own it.
You do own it?
Oh,
so
okay.
you get to pet it and look at it. But you haven't read it yet.
Yeah. I haven't read it yet. Yeah, it's on the shelf over there with, like, my pretty covers.
All the pretty books.
Yeah, I know. I've heard the same thing about the second book. Like, the first book was super, super loved, and then the second book, people are like, eh. So I'm very curious to see why that is. But probably because you said, like, that, I feel like that's a good guess.
I feel like
on
that's
that.
how, like, Renee Adier, who wrote The Wrath in the Dawn and The Flame in the Mist.
The second book?
The Rose and the Dagger. And then she's got The Flame in the Mist, and I can't remember the second one for that. And both of those, the first books, I was like, 5 stars. I am here for this. I love it. It's so good. And the second books just fell really flat for me. I think duologies are tricky to pull off, especially, if you get those of us, you know me, I love my romance. So when you pull that, like, romance-heavy first book, and then sometimes in the second book, like, they're separated for a lot of it, or it's all about, like, politics or blah blah blah.
I like
I'm
politics.
like, give me the romantic angst. You love politics?
As long as it's well done. But I like politics. But
I don't like them at the expense of the romance.
Yes, Hanna is our little romance person, which, I mean, we all love romance, but I do agree with that, though. I feel like the couple of duologies that I have read, the good ones, or the ones that I enjoyed both books of, they don't really have a romance, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? It's something else that it focuses on. And I think that's why, because the same thing with Renee's book, I read the first book and I loved it so much with The Wrath in the Dawn. And then I started reading the second one, but I couldn't get into it, and I couldn't understand why. And I don't know. I feel like the duologies are hard because it is a different balance of storytelling than a trilogy is.
Yeah.
And we're used to trilogies. We're used to a set, because duologies, I feel like, haven't really come into play until recently, really. I mean, the last couple of years. Before then, they were very few and far in between, and then it was all trilogies, and then now duologies are kind of more of a
Maybe they're less of a risk for publishers sometimes.
Well, they are.
Yeah, 'cause
they definitely are.
Contract.
Because usually recently at least, when they do a book contract, it has been 2 books, per contract, and then you really have to sell well for them to pick up the third book. And so when you see that announcement for somebody saying, oh, we're going to do a third book, like, that's a big deal for an author, because it's harder. Sometimes it's even harder to get that third book deal than it was to get the first 2. And I know, especially with, like, the traditional publishing ups and downs constantly. I remember there was an author, poor thing, she had to get off Twitter for a while, and she had to, like, restart her Twitter and do all just friends Twitter, because she had a book deal for book 1 and 2, and the first book came out and it just did not do well. The book was very well written and very fast. Like, I really liked it personally.
It's just maybe not the right book at the right moment in the market or something.
Yes, right. Yeah. And the publisher actually dropped the second book. It was the first right of refusal. And so then she published, I think she published the second book, and then the publisher never picked up the third book, but it was supposed to be a trilogy. And so all of the readers were like, why can't you do this? And so she was like, well, you know what? I will write this book for you, but let me do a Kickstarter. Let me see if you guys, help. And she gave a very serious breakdown of how much it would take for her to publish it, edited all this stuff. And actually, I felt like she went a little cheaper than I would have, just because, and she put in, she's like, it would take me 3 months to write this book, and this is what it would take. And if I'm putting all of this, like, I am the one that provides for my family, so these are how my utilities would break down and my food would break down. Like, she really, and I was like, girl, like, you should ask for more because you are, like, the sole provider. Anyway, people, they just went crazy. They thought that she should not get paid for it because she's writing a book that's going to pay her. And so she got a lot of flack for it, had to get off social media, had to restart her Twitter and make it all friends. And this is such a random tangent. I'm sorry.
That's sad, though.
It is. But that's just the reality when it comes to publishing. You have to really make it work. And I know in indie publishing, like, there's people who just stop publishing the series if it's not selling because for that exact reason. But with this, because it was a traditional published author, and she was like, I'll do it myself, but it requires all these payments. Anyway, it was a big whole thing. And so I feel like now why the duologies are becoming a little bit more popular is because of that reason. It's because it's easier for a publisher to put in that commitment for 2 books versus the whole, 2 books and then a possibility of a trilogy or the first 3 books right away, because of all these things that go into it.
You're right, though. I don't
But
feel like we're
yeah,
used to reading the arc of them, because
right.
it can often, I don't know, and sometimes we forgive like a slow book 3. Like a slow book 3 is kind of something people are used to, or sorry,
A
slow book 2 in
Oh, book
in
2.
a trilogy. But I don't know. I like
But you can't have that with a duology.
You can't. Like then you're just like, wah. The
Right,
only
yeah.
one I can think of, well, I did like Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom, but I don't really remember Crooked Kingdom that well. But the one I remember really liking is I do love the Warcross Wildcard duology. And that one, I feel like it's because she ended with a cliffhanger, like a huge cliffhanger, and a big reversal of like the love interest being suddenly like, what's going to happen? And like it ended like that. And then you got everything resolved in the second book. So I think maybe the pacing of it worked better.
Yeah.
Because you can handle a cliffhanger for a 2-book series, I feel like.
Right. Yeah, that's
And
true.
sometimes like Spin the Dawn, I'm like, well, that was pretty good. And it was a bit of a cliffhanger, but maybe enough happened that I was like, I'll read it later.
And I feel like that's how I feel about duologies. When it comes to book 1, I usually feel more satisfied. Like it wraps things up a little bit better than in a trilogy, because the second book, I don't know, just in my mind, I feel like when I'm reading a trilogy, the first book can have a cliffhanger and then the second book resolves it, but then the second book is also a little bit slower, and then you have like this big showdown in the third book, right? But with the duologies, you have the first book like can literally be a standalone.
Yeah, often.
If that makes sense. So then reading the second book is a lot harder, because you're like, okay, but so much stuff has been resolved already, and like just make it a standalone then. I don't know. This is like one of those weird conversations. Yeah.
No one cares.
I don't know.
No publishers will listen to us, but we'll just keep writing our own books and do what we want.
Yes.
And publish them
Basically.
ourselves.
Which this is actually a really interesting segue into Joanna's book.
It's true.
Because that was a standalone for the longest time.
In fact, I don't know. Are there going to be more?
I have no idea.
I haven't read the second one. Okay, so the book I read.
Yes, please tell us.
Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. I think a lot of people have either read it or seen the movie.
I have seen the movie.
I've done both.
I've done both.
I feel like a bad reader that I haven't read it yet. I keep meaning to.
I listened to it on audio, and I really liked it because it was narrated by Will Wheaton.
Yep, I did too. That was one of my first audiobooks, and I was like,
too.
I love audios now. Yes.
It was because, in fact, it was the first credit I used when I joined Audible.
Maybe that's why I gotta try it then.
Because he
did a fantastic job.
And there are some parts that could be hard when he's reading off stats of the leaderboard or whatever, but I think he does it well. So for those of you out there that don't know the story, it's in the future, set in the future, dystopian world. The world's awful. But there was this video game creator named James Halliday who created what's called the Oasis, which is a virtual world where pretty much everyone goes there to work, to go to school, to escape, speaking of escaping reality. And the main character, Wade Watts, he's this poor kid, his parents are dead, he's living with this kind of not so nice aunt, and he attends school online in this oasis. And the beginning of the book, we learn that the creator, James Halliday, has died, and he has no heirs to his $1 billion, $240 billion fortune. He has no heirs, and so he's set up this contest to find an Easter egg, and whoever finds it first will be the sole heir and will own the oasis. And so James Halliday was obsessed with the 80s. And that's what I kind of loved about this too, because I was born in the 80s. Show my age a little bit.
Yeah,
And so reading it, like, I was little in the 80s. So some of it I didn't know, but it was kind of fun to see all of these, like, old, like, vintage things that these people in the future are, like, obsessed with, because they're trying to study this guy's life in order to find a clue.
I think that's why this story has such mass appeal too, like why it broke out as big as it did, because it gives such nostalgia to people who might not normally, like, read or watch, like, a dystopian or a lit RPG, but because of all the 80s fun.
Well, and because it's all mashed up together, too.
Yeah, and I think with Stranger Things coming out and everything, that whole 80s appeal, like, I think there were just a few years where it was, like, all about going back to the 80s, and it kind of hit that, you know, trope.
Yes. So I rewatched the movie with my husband over the weekend, kind of in preparation for this. I started re-listening to it again, too, but I didn't get all the way through it. But what I loved about the movie is that the different trials are different. And so even though, like, having read the book, I knew how the movie was going to end, it was different. And so it was still like, I don't know how he's going to figure this one out. So it was a lot of fun. It was almost like re-experiencing it again.
It's like an alternate version.
Yeah.
It's like it is an adaptation. And I think often we kind of forget that kind of movies can be adaptations of books and almost like a piece of art in their own right. Yeah. And a lot of the time, I think maybe screenwriters are so scared about diverting from the story, because fans obviously, you know, can get a bit funny if you kind of change things. But I think almost Ready Player One diverted so much that it was almost like it had the same core bits of the story, but like there was a whole lot more romance. There were like the whole events were different, and it was almost so different that I could kind of appreciate it as a kind of related but quite different adaptation of the story. Yes. So I kind of wasn't comparing it to the book as much, and I enjoyed them both on their own merits, because I don't think you could have done a direct adaptation of the book, because there was so much detail in there that you just could not have showed on the big screen.
Well, and there were so many slow parts, like the first like trial that he has to do. I think in the book he is playing Joust, the video game, and on like a visual medium like a movie, that would have just been boring. And so to have the car race instead, I thought was a great choice. And it was kind of that way with all of them, is that there was a few things that Wade does in the book that Ernest Cline kept us, like, the pacing great as we're reading the book, but it would have been very boring on screen.
Right. Yeah, which is, I think, is when a good, like, adaptation of like a book or, you know, source material, where you take into consideration that not everything needs to be in the movie, but adapting it to, but keeping the same, I guess, the same emotions and the same, like, because, you know, the car race versus him playing the game, you still get him participating in something like that, but adapting it in a way that is like more visual and more enticing to the viewer. I think that's how like a good adaptation works, you know,
I agree.
Versus it's just,
Yeah, and the movie did speed it up a little bit, because I think in the book they had to find the key, and then they had to find the gate, and then they had to find the key. But in the movie version, they just grabbed all the keys. So, and I have not read the second book.
Yes, I haven't either. I
haven't even heard that much about it.
I've heard mixed.
It really surprised me.
Reviews about it. Some people love it. Some people.
I think it's gonna be hard to follow up a book that did be such a breakout that it hit a whole bunch of people who don't normally read that stuff, or who don't even normally read in a lot of cases when a book is that big. I don't know. I think it'd be hard to follow up.
Yeah, it's kind of like The Martian. I heard, I don't know how true this was, but I think like a couple years back there was like talk of The Martian having a sequel, and I'm like, well, but how do you have how do you have a sequel of that? Like him teaching? Like what? Like what do you know, whatever. But it would be the same aspect because, you know, you had a really good movie adaptation, the book is really good and has like a really good following. And so making a sequel like 7 years, 5 years later would have just been like, what? Like, this is unexpected. And so that's how I personally feel about Ready Player One. Like, I didn't need a
I didn't
sequel.
either.
Like, I'm cool just making up what they did with the inheritance and how they, you know what I mean? Like, so I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to read it because of that. Like, it's just
I think
as
sometimes
good as a standalone.
too, when you think like your characters are happy and settled, you kind of sometimes don't want them to get unsettled.
Yeah. I think sometimes you just need to let a successful book be a successful book and maybe not try and kind of piggyback on that.
Maybe he had way more ideas from the beginning. We haven't read it, but...
Yeah, we can't really criticize it if we haven't read it, to be fair.
That's true.
To be fair.
Maybe it's awesome.
Yeah, we're not really criticizing the book, just our feelings about the
situation.
situation.
Of having a sequel.
Yes.
Anyway.
Right.
I know when I read, like, the first Red Rising trilogy and it all wraps up, and then when the second Red Rising trilogy starts, I was actually kind of annoyed because everything that had been settled got unsettled. And I'm like, I get that you still want to do this with these characters in this world, but I almost wish it had been, like, different characters. Because you feel sad, like, that stuff didn't work out.
It didn't work out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is true. I felt a bit of that, but I felt that that's maybe why he also introduced that multiple point of view and, like, introduced new characters and set it, like, 10 years or whatever in the future. So it was, you know, it wasn't, like, a direct lead on.
It wasn't terrible, and I can't say more thoughts without spoilers, but there was a certain sense of, like, but they were happy.
Yeah, no, I get that.
That's how I felt about the Cassandra Clare Mortal Instruments. Like, the first 3 books, I was good with that. And then like the other 3 to make that a 6-book series happened. And I have the 4th book. I opened it once, but I had absolutely no desire to, like, I love the characters, but it was in my mind, like, they were done and I already made up, like, my own ending to whatever happened because, like, the trilogy was done. So I have a hard time with, like, that whole restarting a settled character thing. So we'll see if I ever read those books.
Especially after so much time has passed.
Right.
There was a huge gap. I read the latter 3, but I don't remember much of them. I loved the first 3. 5.
I feel like 4 and 5 were okay, and then book 6 was really leading. It was almost like a prequel, like the second half of it, into the next series, and I thought it was really good. And I have all these feelings. I don't read her anymore. I was so burned by one of the books, but I did feel like it was interesting the way she made you way more invested in the next series by putting all the characters in the end of that series. So I feel like it's a bit of what she was doing, but I don't know if it needed to be 3 books.
Right. Yeah.
I think I'm the only person who doesn't like this series.
I don't like it anymore.
I didn't get past book 1. It really annoyed me. Maybe I should go back to it and try it again.
No, I do think it depends on when you read it. Like, I've read those books before they were anywhere. Like, honestly, like, we got a shipment of, so I used to work at Marshall's, right? And we would get, you know, shipments from other stores, right? Because that's what Marshall's and Home Goods is. It's just like from wholesales from other stores, like clothing stores or whatever. And so sometimes we would get books. And so we got the books in paperback one at a time. They were like $5.99 for a paperback because it's Marshall's. And I read them on my break. Like, I got them and I was like, this is a book. Cool, whatever. I did not hear one word about this book, like, at all, anywhere, this whole series. And then maybe 6 months, maybe a year later, it just suddenly blew up everywhere. And I was like, oh, I was cool before it was cool, you know, kind of thing. But I think that it really would have depended. Like, if I read it when it was like the prime hype for it, I don't think I would have liked it.
Well, they have such high expectations for it. Instead of just being able to enjoy it. That's how I felt about Twilight. Like, I started reading Twilight when the first book came out and before there was any hype, and I was just like, I like this cover, this looks interesting. And it wasn't until, I don't know, when the movies came out, I guess, and like a little bit before that, like when the book started to get big, that everyone
right
had,
before fourth book.
yeah, I think so. That's when everyone had so many opinions all of a sudden. I'm like, I don't know if I would have read this book now, but I enjoyed them without all the pressure. I was a Twilight hipster. It's like I read Twilight before it was cool.
I was a Hunger Game hipster.
Before it was cool.
There you go.
Yes, I read that one at peak hype.
I read the first one like 5 months after it came out.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, so that kind of segues nicely into my book.
Perfect.
That's how I
You're welcome, Alison.
And I actually didn't. So I actually, very rarely for me, I watched the first movie of The Hunger Games before reading the book. And I almost never do that. But I just moved into a new house. And my housemate was wanting to do this like bonding activity. So we all went to the cinema anyway to watch The Hunger Games. And I kind of struggle a bit with those kind of films that have that sort of really tense atmosphere. Anyway,
so
but
tense.
It was great. It was great. And then I picked up the books a couple of weeks later and just like devoured them. So anyway, so my book is The Hunger Games, which I think possibly sets the standard for brutal contests in young adult books. I don't think you really get much more brutal than The Hunger Games. I'm sure most people listening have read it, but if you haven't, I'm just going to do a quick kind of recap. So The Hunger Games is a dystopian book. It's set in a dystopian America, which is split into 13 districts ruled by the capital. And generally, the lower the number of the district, the richer it is. And in retaliation for a historical war between the districts and the capital, each year, one boy and one girl from each district is selected to compete in the Hunger Games. And essentially, the 24 tributes are dumped in this huge, vast arena and left to fight each other until there's only one survivor. So unlike kind of Spin the Door,
while everyone watches.
Yeah, well, everyone watches, yeah. And like Ready Player One, where you're kind of competing for this like great big prize and, you know, wealth and riches and stuff. Basically in the Hunger Games, you are competing to live. And that's your primary goal. So you do also, the victor does also get they get a special home in the wealthy part of their district, and they kind of get income from the capital for them and their family for life. So there is a kind of boon at the end of it, but really you're kind of fighting for survival, whilst, you know, everyone else watches on, and it's like this weird, bizarre form of entertainment. So for the richer districts, winning the Hunger Games is also a status symbol, and the teenagers actually train and volunteer to compete in the games, so it's kind of considered a bit of an honour. But for the outer poorer districts, then it's pretty much a death sentence, because they're kind of underfed, half-starved, they don't have the skills or the training to kind of compete against, I can't remember what they call them, there's a word for them, but like the stronger...
The careers.
Yeah, the career tributes, that's it, because they're like doing it as a career. So in the Hunger Games, for the first time, I think in District 12's history, they do have a volunteer. So Katniss, who's the main character, volunteers to take the place of her younger sister in the games when Prim's name is drawn out of the lottery. And she's then taken to the capital with the male tribute, Peter, and they are prepared for the games. And so you have this whole training sequence bit, which I love. I always love a training sequence element. You have all the kind of like drama and like all the, everything in the capital, and the kind of the glamour of how they get these tributes ready for the games. And, you know, it's a bit like a kind of TV show. It is like a TV show. They get interviewed and all this kind of stuff. And then they kind of get dumped in the arena, and from I think that point at which they get dumped in the arena to the end, like it is a nauseating level of tension. It's
like you just don't stop reading.
I could literally not put this book down, and I swear, like I was, I remember reading the series because I was up until like 2:00 in the morning reading, and I went into work the next day, and I was just like a zombie because I just could not stop reading this book. And then I think the next night I had the next book, and I was like reading on the train into work, reading whilst walking to the office, reading on my lunch break, reading whilst walking home, and then I was like up all night the next night. I don't think I got much work done that week, but yeah, so it is definitely one of my favorite series. Yeah, and definitely cemented my love of that genre.
That's so funny. Like, I read the entire series in a week, and then I was like, I'm never reading these again.
I feel a bit like that because it feels. I felt quite traumatized after reading it. Yeah.
But once you're in, it's like you read a chapter and you have to read the entire trilogy. Sorry, like that's what you signed up for.
I've read it a couple times.
I might eventually, but right now I have not.
Yeah, my dad doesn't read young adult. I've mentioned this on here, but he loves the movies. And so after he watched the movies, he actually borrowed my trilogy and read it. And I was like, wow, okay, cool. Apparently that's what he likes. He was just really fascinated. And I mean, that's an interesting movie adaptation too, because they did the whole splitting of the third book, which I hate with a passion.
But I felt
Money grab.
It was a really close adaptation, or certainly for the first book, it was really close. Yeah, so quite different from Ready Player One.
I was impressed that they stuck so close and that it worked, because I feel like it often, if they stick really close, sometimes it doesn't work.
Yeah, I do feel like though in more. Yeah, exactly. I feel like more fast-paced books with a lot of action are easier to adapt into a visual, like a show or a movie, where you're not really hitting those roadblocks when it comes to like the pacing and stuff like that. But you know, more, I don't know, if like fantasy, more maybe world building-esque like books or something, like you have to kind of fill in the gaps of the action and the characters, because there's so much focus on the actual world building that you sometimes lose the pacing of like the characters and the action. But I feel like the Hunger Games did a really good job at painting the picture of this world, and balanced it well with like the actual crazy action that went into it.
I think maybe it helped in that there weren't too many different settings. You essentially had District 12, which is quite a simple setting. Then you have the capital, which is such a contrast and is like this really crazy garish place. And then you have the arena. And it was just those kind of three places. So it wasn't perhaps, I don't know, you perhaps didn't have like the world building. If you have a complete fantasy world and you have all these different names and places and journeys, because characters often go on like journeys and travels through different places, don't they? Right. You have a lot of like walking through woods and camping and stuff sometimes.
Yeah, and I feel like you focus, or like filmmakers or show makers, they focus so much to get that right, that sometimes like the character situations or whatever are a little less I don't know. That's how I feel sometimes when it comes to like those kind of adaptations where it's more world building versus like I really liked oh my gosh, it's Terry Brooks. What is the called? Yes, Shannara Chronicles. I really liked. I haven't read the books, right? But I picked up the book after I've watched the first season.
It was good.
And it was really good.
I was iffy on it. but I did read the books.
But I like didn't. Okay, so I didn't enjoy the book as much as I would have if I read it before I watched the show. You know what I mean? And I don't know if it's just because they did more on the character side of things versus like the world building, where it should have had more world building. So it's like finding that balance. Like it's so hard. I try not to compare, but still.
Shannara. I'm laughing right now because I know my friend Sonia. Hi, Sonia. Will be listening to this, and we have had ranty conversations about Shannara all the time while hiking.
That's awesome. We might need to do an episode on Shannara. I want ranty Hanna.
Ranty Hanna. I'm like, I feel like it would be a rather large diversion at the moment, but I do have feelings about Shannara.
I think it's about 20 years since I read it, and I'm not even sure I've got it, and if I have, it's probably in a box up in the attic somewhere. I don't remember much about it. I think I enjoyed it, but it obviously didn't stick with me that much.
Yeah, I had a hard time getting through it, but epic fantasy is not my thing,
it's not
unless it's Brandon Sanderson. Or Kristen. Or Kristen.
Right. I think my thing was I was too used to the show because it was way more young adultish esque and hitting.
Show.
It is.
Yes, exactly. And so when I read well, yes. Okay, Hannah.
How long are we gonna talk about this? We're gonna get ranty Hannah.
Anyway, moving on. Okay, fine. We can move on to my book then. We'll have an episode where you can rant. Yes. So I read The Testing by Joelle Charbonneau, I think. I can never say those, like, a lot of
Charbonneau.
letters.
Yes.
Charbonneau, we'll go with
You
it.
gotta have a little French in
Um,
you. I'll help you with my Canadianness.
yes, thank you, thank you. So I'm just gonna read like part of the back of the book because I feel like this trilogy is not really as well known as a lot of dystopian. Which I don't know why. I felt like it was so good. Anyway, okay. So the Seven Stages War left much of the planet a charred wasteland. The future belongs to the next generation's chosen few who must rebuild it. But to enter this elite group, candidates must first pass the testing. Their one chance at a college education and a rewarding career. And so Sia Vale is honored to be chosen as a testing candidate and eager to prove her worthiness as a university student and future leader of the United Commonwealth. I was like, United States. No, it's just United Commonwealth. But on the eve of her departure, her father's advice hints at a darker side to her upcoming studies. Trust no one. I'm just gonna leave it there. No, okay, no wait, I'll read the rest of it. But surely she can trust Thomas, her handsome childhood friend who offers an alliance. Thomas, who seems to care more about her with the passing of every grueling and deadly day at the testing. To survive, Sia must choose love without truth or life without trust. So yeah, this follows. So Sia just graduates from high school and she is chosen to undergo the testing. And basically it's just, exams and test like different physical and mental tests that they have to go through. And she goes into it with the warning from her dad, who has undergone the testing, that, trust no one. There's a lot more to this than you think. Now go do this. Great stuff, So yeah, in this society, it was really interesting because it was kind of interesting to see the part of the testing where it was actual like academic and knowledge aspects, because I feel like when it comes to the contest, you usually have, especially in a dystopian world, you usually have like the survival and the physical aspect of it and more like ingenuity in that sense versus the actual like book smarts
and disability to be brutal.
Yes, basically, yeah. But with the testing, you have both sides. You have the actual like book knowledge and you also have like the physical aspect of it that comes later into play. I would say there is a trigger warning on this book that happens pretty early on. I was like, do I say what it is? When I say trigger warning, do I tell them what it is?
I think
maybe
so.
Say, yeah, because now you've just said there's a trigger warning and that could be anything.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I guess death? Suicide?
Yeah,
does that work?
We don't have to say who it is.
Right, yeah. So this world is brutal. Like it is. There's a lot that's put on these kids, and the testings that they go through, it's a lot on them. And so Sia's in this world now where she is away from home and is trying to figure out what she's doing and like who she can trust and can't trust. And obviously her dad said trust nobody, but she has her friend there. So, automatically there's that. I do feel like there's like a love triangle situation. I don't remember exactly, but I think one of the guys at the school, who's like a little more the enemy, quote unquote, whatever, and then her friend. So she is in this like group of people basically that the basic dystopian tropes I feel like from that time are there, because the book came out I think like 2012, 13 maybe, so it came out right around that time where this kind of genre and storytelling was very prominent.
And I feel like that's when I read it. So I'm trying to like remember if I can help you out with any of the details. And I'm like, I know I read this book. I have like a sense of the feel of the book.
Yeah.
But I don't really remember the details.
I read it more recently. I think I read it last year, maybe the year before. Anyway, I really enjoyed it. I think I really love these kind of trials books and contests. Like I think it's definitely one of my favorite tropes. And what you were saying, Valia, about the kind of academic and the kind of like it not just being about this kind of survival situation, I really enjoyed that, like all the kind of puzzles and challenges and how she had to kind of figure out how to do it, and because it was lethal, like if you got it wrong you died, right. So it does have some of that kind of brutality of the Hunger Games, And I seem to remember, I can't remember what the love triangle was, but I think it was maybe quite obvious who the love interest was gonna be, because I normally get really
I felt
bugged
like
by
that
love
too.
triangles, and I don't remember it being an issue in this book. So I think maybe I knew who she was kind of gonna end up with, and that made it kind of okay.
Right.
And
It's just a romance with a complication.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe
And
it's a
it
little
has,
better.
I'm not going to give any spoilers, but it has an awesome like cliffhanger thing at the end, or like a twist at the end, which is kind of does relate to the romance a bit.
Yeah. Anyway, you guys should all read this trilogy. It's so good. And I feel like if you do love dystopian, and if you do love the contest trope, like this is a really good one that it just really slides under like the radar for a lot of people, because I don't remember anybody ever talking about this series that I know of. And I really enjoyed it. Like the writing is really, really good. And even having like the smart trials that they do and like the knowledge part, I personally did not feel like that it took away from the pacing at all, which I feel like is a huge thing, because usually if you have like a quote unquote smart situation happening, sometimes it just like is kind of overwhelming to the reader, or like it gets bogged down or slows down too much. But in this case, I didn't feel like it did that at all. Like the whole book was really good pace, no matter what the trial or the situation was, which is rare.
Maybe
like,
just having those life or death stakes for both kind of sides of it helps. And I do feel like sometimes in the physical trials, like, I'm trying to remember this book now, but I feel like the fact that she was smart, it kind of was like another puzzle to figure out. It was just different.
Right.
Which kind of helped with it. I don't know. It's been a long time, but I do remember really enjoying them, and I read the whole trilogy.
Right. Yeah. So definitely a good one for you guys if you've been looking for something Hunger Games-esque, but didn't want to reread the Hunger Games because you're traumatized. Here's another book to traumatize you.
It's not quite as traumatizing as Hunger Games.
Yes.
Well, because
Yeah,
more of
true.
them can live in it, right? Isn't it like if you pass, you get to be an elite or whatever, but they want like a few of them to pass, they don't want all the
Right, it's not just the one person. Exactly. Yes, definitely.
They're just trying to make sure you're worthy.
Yes, basically. Ugh, I couldn't imagine somebody else deciding that for me. Like, I don't know. Anyway, I'm not going to get into the dystopian world politics.
But I can draw.
I know.
Is that worth anything?
I was like, how about I could type really fast? Does that help?
You can grow plants.
And grow plants. Oh, I mean, I guess that
think
in
that's
a wasteland, that could be helpful. Anyway, we do have, obviously, if you guys know, our trope conversations always end with recommendations of other books like this. So we do have a few that we wanted to mention. Hanna had one she wanted to talk about, so we'll let her go first.
I do. So this is the Evermore Academy by Audrey Grey. So book 1. Which one's book 1? Is that Winter?
Yeah.
You're all looking at me. You're like, you're the one who read it, Hanna.
I know.
They're all called Evermore Academy. Yeah,
I think it's
Winter.
Winter.
And in this book, like, she is a human who's in this Fae Academy training to be a bodyguard. So they're all, like, paired up, the bodyguards and then the Fae royalty, who also can kick butt on their own. So they have to, like, kind of learn to train and fight together. And they do all this training throughout the book, which is, like, all the romance. Oh, the training, as we discussed before. And then they all get, for their final exam, they get like dropped off through a portal into a place, and they have to all make their way back to like safety. So there's a whole bunch of challenges and things that are going to happen, and it's just like a test to see how the two of them work together as a team to get through. And not everyone will get through. I think there's a time limit. I think if you don't make it through by the certain time, you fail. And if you fail, you get, like, bad for the humans if they fail. We'll just say that. But, yeah, it's a really fun book. And if you love this trope, I realized while thinking about it that all of Audrey Grey's series have this trope in them. So her dystopian is a very, like, again, like this whole dystopian Hunger Games, there's a trial in it. They have to, like, do a bunch of tasks. And then even her Kingdom of Runes, her high fantasy one, book 2, is another big trial. So she likes competitions and games in her books. So if you like them, you should read them.
Yeah, that works. Joanna, you had one too, right?
Yeah, The Princess Trials by Cordelia Castell. It's kind of a mix between the Selection series and the Hunger Games.
Okay. The Selection series.
It's pretty good. I liked
That
it.
sounds
Yeah.
like an interesting mashup.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting mashup. So essentially, there's a prince who needs to have a bride, and they have a contest kind of like in the Selection where they have a bunch of girls come into the palace, but they have to do trials, and they're like physical trials, like dangerous trials, like walking through wastelands and different things like that. So the main character, her name is Zia. She is a part, and this is another dystopian world. She's a part of like a rebellion, and she tries to join these trials kind of as a spy to kind of like see if she can find secret entrances and things like that. But then, of course, she meets the prince and doesn't like him, but has kind of a connection.
I love that trope, though.
Yeah, I
like,
do too.
I'm not really here for the guy. And
Yeah.
the guy, and they're like,
Yeah.
oh, wait.
And she kind of gets cast as, they call her the bucking bronco. Like, she's supposed to be the butt of everyone's jokes on this like TV show as they air it to everyone. But anyway, I've read the first book. I liked it.
Okay.
There's more. I don't know how many there are, but it's pretty good. So yeah, The Princess Trials by Cordelia Castell.
Nice. Alison, you had a book you wanted to talk about too, right?
Yeah, so I think this has been mentioned on the podcast before, but I recently read Trial of Thorns by Stacey Tremblay and loved it because, like the Hunger Games, it is more of like a trial than a contest. But it's set in a fae world, and essentially they're all competing to see who is the biggest, baddest fae who can go and save everyone from this this evil threat. And different to the Hunger Games, there are multiple rounds of the trial, which I really loved. So there's all these like different situations, and each round is really unique and exciting. And there's magic and strange creatures and all that kind of fun stuff. So yeah, you should definitely read it.
I enjoyed that one,
That's
too.
a good one. You actually had a book that came out that fits this trope, so I think you should tell us about that one too.
I did, and it's recently released. So it's the first in a new series. It's called The Shadow Games, and it is a dystopian fantasy series. So it's I kind of describe it as a bit like the Hunger Games with supernatural powers. So particularly if you like books like Red Queen, there's a little bit of Red Rising vibes in there. So it's not quite as lethal, but there's definitely a bit of a risk of death. So it's set in New Vegas, which are the sort of tall towers that rise above what used to be Las Vegas and are separated from the city floor by this great big thick smog. And the people who live in New Vegas don't think anyone's alive under that smog, but that's where the criminals get banished to die. And unbeknown to Vesper, who's the main character, and most residents of New Vegas, some people have supernatural powers. And those people and those powers are identified in a test when they're 18. And if they're thought to be an asset to the city, they're taken to the Royal Academy and trained up to use those powers. But if during this testing process they detect rebel tendencies in the young people, then they're banished to the city floor. And it's probably no big spoiler, but Vesper, along with a group of other kids, is banished. And on the city floor, her and the other students who fail the test are captured and sold as slaves to one of a number of factions who kind of rule this this crazy underground city made up of criminals and everyone who's been banished from the city above. And she is the main sort of focus of the book, as she's trained to use her powers to compete for a faction in the games. And the games in this context determines which of the factions control the two wells, which are the only water supplies in the sort of old Vegas on the city floor. So the factions who control them can then set the water price, and they basically rule this underground city. So yeah, it's kind of a story that involves supernatural powers. There's a kind of cute little tiny runt of a dragon who Vesper rescues.
I was going to say, I saw on the cover
there
Baby
is a
Dragon.
dragon.
So
Yeah.
I think that's an important thing to mention.
Yeah, so she can kind of talk. She's a telepath, so she can talk mind to mind with him. Yeah, and I love the dragon. He is definitely my favourite character.
Sounds intriguing.
Yeah, that sounds really good. I mean, I'll be reading it, obviously, but that sounds good.
Yeah.
I'm glad it fits this trope so you can talk about it.
I know, I'm so excited. It has only been out a few weeks, so yeah, you can check it out in all the usual places.
Yes, which we do have a link to the Amazon book club where it has links for like the Kindle books and stuff, and also Bookshop where you can get paperback or hardback covers of, or yeah, paperback, hardback of books that we discuss on the show. Just basically two places for you to easily find the books we talk about here, and the links are in the description and also like on our website and Instagram. And yeah, this was a good conversation. Very fun. A bit of tangents, which I love personally. But next week, Kay and Abby will be joining Joanna and me. So we're saying a brief bye to Hanna and Alison. But before we go our separate ways, I'd like to know what everybody's reading this week. So Hanna, what's on your TBR for now?
I'm reading 3 books. But one of them that I'll tell you about is by this lovely author named Valia. Because I'm reading... I know. I'm reading Blood of the Fae.
Oh.
Your book number 2 in Valia's Fae book, I'm halfway through, is fun.
Oh, yeah. I forgot I had that out.
And I always find it amusing. Yeah, you wrote this book. I think it's funny when I read books by my friends that I talk to a lot, because sometimes the characters say things that my friends say.
Yeah.
Like that. I'm like, that was in Valia's voice. They're super fun. Trilogy. You should read them.
Thanks. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. It's
Joanna.
not a lie. That's what I'm reading.
I appreciate that. Joanna, what about you? What are you reading?
I'm still stuck reading, but I'm going to pick up Abby's When Planets Fall. Abby
Oh, yeah.
I want to read that next.
Awesome. Alison, what about you?
You mean which of like the 8 books?
Yeah, pick one that you want to talk about.
So I'm partway through Spin the Dawn, so that I'm going to try and finish that because I am really enjoying it. And on ebook, I have just started reading. I can't remember the exact name. It's the Camdaria Chronicles. So K.L. Moody's, and I can't remember what the official is. It called the Camdaria Chronicles?
That's the series
That's
thing.
the
Are you on the first book?
Elements of Camdaria?
Yeah, so I'm starting. Yeah, Elements of Camdaria. Yeah, so I'm reading those.
There's 12
Nice.
of them, so if you don't remember the name of the one you're reading, I think
It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really fun and good series that I enjoyed as well. I am reading, once again, not anything fantasy related, because I feel like that's the only books that like get me out of my reading slumps. Once a month, the book that I finish. But I'm reading 5 Total Strangers by, oh my gosh, Natalie. I'm going to say Natalie Parker, but I might be wrong on the last name. But it's about a girl who's going home for Christmas, and the planes get grounded, and so she gets in the car with total strangers to drive home, and stuff happens.
So it's a book to make you terrified of ever driving with someone you don't know.
I mean, I already don't like driving with people I don't know. And I also don't like people driving. Like, I need to be driving. So this book is like extra anxiety because I'm like, dude, just get out of the car and go find you one that like you can drive. Anyway, sorry, little tangents. That's the today's show for you guys. But thank you for listening to the Reading Queens. Before you go, please take a moment to leave us a review and follow us on your favorite podcast platform. And then stay tuned for next week. Happy reading. Bye.
Bye.